Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. We've partnered with Dataversity to provide listeners with 20% off your first training center purchase with promo code ALGMANDL. Go to dataleadershiptraining.com to learn more. Today on episode 86, we welcome Rochelle Groh. Rochelle is the co-founder of Cutclass and host of the Allergic to Small Talk podcast. She and her team at Cutclass teach people to ditch their 9-to-5 to start their own business and how to grow their businesses through networking. Rochelle, welcome to the show.
What's up, Anthony? I'm so excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. So please just take a few minutes and give us the story of your career and how all of your earlier experiences led up to doing what you do now.
Yeah, so I used to be a trashy lady. I spent about 8 years within the waste industry, and I always like to say I used to be a trashy lady, so it's a little fun joke I like to say. And while I was in my career in the waste industry, I ended up working myself up the corporate ladder. I got my executive MBA, I got the nice car, I had a nice house, and I had a pretty good life for myself. At least that's what I thought that was supposed to make me happy. Everything that you think that you're supposed to do from society and from like what your parents tell you, right? And I had it all, but every day when I went home, I just found myself like really unhappy and I couldn't understand why. There was something that was missing for me. And it was more of the fact that I was living my life up until that point for the extrinsic things that were kind of driving me in the world. And I wasn't really finding out what was going to drive me intrinsically. And that's when I just decided to walk away from the corporate job, walk away from the car, walk away from everything, and really figure out what it was I wanted to do in life. And I figured out that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a business owner. And I do have 2 businesses now. One is Cutclass, and I'm also the host of Allergic to Small Talk. And really what I want to do with Cutclass and what we are doing is we teach people that are in that exact same position that we were all those years ago, when they find themselves kind of doing everything that they thought they were supposed to do and kind of figure out, you know what, I kind of want more for my life in the realm of freedom and flexibility and also finances. So I find people that are maybe wanting to be corporate dropouts and teaching them the tips and tools to create a business of their own.
That's awesome, and I think a helpful benefit to people that are really feeling that same way. And I think that there's so many interesting avenues to this that I would be that I'm interested in exploring with you. And the first that comes to mind is just like, this has been, I think we've heard this story before, right? The corporate person just isn't happy, does something crazy, and then becomes, on the cover of Fortune later, in their career. But it's almost a cliche, but at the same rate, like, I think that this is a relatable story for people, because even if you aren't one who really wants to go and do the whole entrepreneurial path or feels that strong, hey, I don't love like hanging out on the beach all the time. Like, people are like, I want to do that as my life. I'm like, I like the idea of it, but maybe not necessarily for me. But I think it's eminently relatable. Like, the idea of being an entrepreneur, just like the idea of being on a beach, sounds great, but it isn't all just perfection and happiness. And so why don't we think about, because right now I'm sure there's plenty of people that are thinking about either they are unhappy in where they are with work. We're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, and we are in situations with our jobs and businesses that may be challenging, or maybe, over the last couple of years, through adversity, we've realized, hey, we don't have quite the satisfaction that we think we should. What's unique about now versus what's the same as it's ever been?
So I'll answer that in two ways. So one, Gallup poll did a study a couple years ago that it was a global study that asked people around the world, like, how satisfied are you with your jobs? And it came back, and the study came back saying that 85% of people around the globe hate their jobs. So That's number one. So I would say that this has been a people kind of not being in love with their jobs is a global issue. And number two, why now, right? So we've come out of the pandemic. People had a taste of what it's like to work from home, right? And they've had a chance to kind of rethink how they're spending their time. And now you're hearing about the great resignation. People are starting to wake up. People are starting to understand that, yes, a job is very important and it is what, provides the means for our lives. But is that it? Is that what we're going to spend 1/3 of our entire lives doing, is working for somebody else? And I think that's kind of why I think it's like, why now? I think people have gotten a taste of what it's like to, what it might be like to work on their own because they've had the chance to work from home due to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think the work from home is certainly something that drives a lot of folks right now, and realizing that you should have more control of your days than just feeling you have to do a bunch of things. And I felt, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was early in my career. And it was the manager, the industry and the job aren't that important. But he said to me, he's like, you have to think about your career as you are the CEO of Anthony Incorporated.
Yeah.
You are deciding every day that you want to go to this other job, and that your client, the business that you're working for, is the client you want to be working with. And having that just permission to feel the flexibility, even in the corporate world, made a big difference to me. And it also impacted how I saw jobs and saw my career. But I think that a lot of people don't necessarily approach things that way. So that's maybe a good first step, is to realize, hey, you're deciding every day you're going to that job. Whether or not you're actively doing it or not, you're making that decision. And you can make another decision if you need to. And it's not as hard as one might think. Now, I'll couple that, though, having done this myself multiple times in my career, gone out and done my own thing, or found a business partner, tried to build a business, or did whatever. You haven't really lived as an entrepreneur until you have no idea where you're getting the cash from for some payment, whether it's mortgage, whether it's payroll, what have you. Until you've gotten to that point, you don't know what it's really like. And that's not for everybody. How do you coach? Because all of a sudden we're starting this thing and I'm telling you all my ideas on this. You're the expert.
Yeah.
How do you manage, how do you manage that fear? Because I've been there. I know what that's like. But that, to me, is the thing that, if a person is okay with the fact that everything's at risk, everything is in question, but you have a passion, or you have a calling, or you have a desire to do something at a level where you're willing to do that, how do you know that that's the right time? How do you coach people through that mental exercise of all of a sudden going out on their own? I mean, it's just a wild thought for people that have been doing something, building skill sets for 20-something years.
Absolutely. So that's a really, really great question. And the way we like to approach this particular scenario is, first, it's kind of talking about how we've kind of been conditioned up into this point in our lives. So let's take a look at our school system. Our school system has been modeled to teach us to be employees. So we go to school from 8 to 3. And if we have working parents, we have to go to after school clubs, so we don't get picked up until 5 or 6. And so that also is what we do for work. We go to work from 8 to 5. And at school, we answer to a boss. At school, we answer to our teacher. And at work, we answer to our boss. And at school, we turn in homework. And at work, we turn in these assignments or projects or what have you. So school has conditioned us to be employees. I'm not saying school's terrible, and I'm not saying school's bad, but school, the initial idea of school was built back in the industrial age to get people ready to go to work in factories. It's not that it is a wrong system. I just think it's flawed, and there's a couple of things that are broken in it. And then when we get to higher level thinking, when we get into college, or we get into wanting to get MBAs or whatever it is, we're given career coaches. We're not given entrepreneurial coaches or small business coaches. So I always like to start there to talk about the world that we've been raised in. This is what we've been raised to do. We're not raised to necessarily be entrepreneurial thinkers or small business thinkers, right? So why, when it feels like it's risky or it feels like we're going out to be a small business owner for the first time, it seems scary, not because like it necessarily is. It's just that we haven't been given access to the information as we've been raised in the world. Does that make sense? Hopefully I didn't go off onto a tangent there, but that's kind of where we start first is talking about how we've been raised as a culture.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I don't think it's something I've ever thought about in that context at all. Is I have to ask, is that where Cutclass comes from? Like the word cut, I have to know where that comes from. What is that? What does that mean?
Ding, 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 ding. Yes, that's absolutely
Right.
why we came up with our business name called the Cutclass, because my business partner, Leslie, and I, we met when we did our executive MBAs at Pepperdine, and we are arguably each other's most expensive friend and business partner because we had to spend lots of money to meet each other. But after we got our degrees, we also had to go back into the corporate world and still get up to the executive suite. But there was still something like missing for us. We're like, dude, we just spent all this money and we worked so hard to get to this like level. Like, why are we still not feeling like we made it? So we thought, like, you know what, let's take all of our experience from our education as well as what we've learned in the corporate world and give it to people in a way that's digestible and easy for them to really start businesses. Like, they don't need to necessarily go to a formal classroom to gain this knowledge. So that's why we did name our business Cutclass. Yeah, so that's kind of the ethos behind it.
I like that a lot. While we're at the name, so like your podcast, I would just want to know a little bit about your podcast as well, because it says allergic to small talk, and I'm like, you have created a podcast about the topic that I hate more than anything. Like, there's nothing that is worse. I would rather give a speech in front of 10,000 people than to have to talk to 5 people with small talk in some random social setting. Like, it's so much worse to talk to those people about the weather or something like that.
Yeah, so allergic to small talk. So I really love people. I really love networking. I moved to England about 4 years ago and I didn't know anybody. So I've had to rebuild my entire life from scratch. And I've done that by developing genuine connections with other human beings in England. And so one of the cornerstones of our program is building your network and building your community. You mentioned earlier, you know, it's risky for people that kind of have been in those corporate roles to then go off on their own and to become a business owner. And when we're in a 9 to 5 job, like, our community and our network is almost created for us, right? Like, we have coworkers, et cetera, and you naturally develop relationships with them. But when you become a business owner, it can feel lonely. And so as a business owner, it's kind of up to you to create that community around you of like-minded people to support you in so many facets of your life that you're going to need it. Like, it's not easy being an entrepreneur. It's not easy being a small business owner. So you have to find that community to support you. So Allergic to Small Talk is a resource to teach people how to network, but also teaches them practical business tips to grow their business.
It's such a good point. And as I think when I was doing independent consulting, what I missed, I was always surrounded by people, but I always was on this journey kind of on my own. And I missed more than the like financial challenges and that stuff bothered me. It was the lack of being able to really build a team or have that team around me the same way. And so I struggled with, how do I plug into that? And I found actually where I drew similar kind of satisfaction was when I started doing like this podcast. It was basically, I started to create a community, started to have that conversation with folks on an individual level when they're guests on the show, but also just that collaboration of talking about data leadership in a bunch of different contexts. For me, that was the community that I always wanted to have, and I didn't need a employer to give that to me, but I had to go out and find that, had to go out and do that. So I think that's a really important point, is not everybody necessarily should go out on their own and should really think about those things, because you're going to find that, hey, we have this tendency as people to swing the pendulum too far in the direction of what's bothering us currently. Right. So if we're really hate the lack of flexibility at our current job, we're working very regimented hours, we're driving in these commutes to the office that we think we should be able to work remotely from, and we're like, I want all the freedom in the world. And then you realize when you have all the freedom in the world, you miss all the structure and all the people and all of that stuff. And you're like,
Yeah.
wait a second, I have gone awry again. And so I think it's, how do you help people know whether or not it's a passing fancy of wanting to be an entrepreneur, like, man, I would love to not have to go to the office today, versus it's something like it's to me, it's like a beach dream sometimes. Like, I really do love the work that I do, and I've loved it for a long time, and it blows my mind that people, like 85% of the people out there, hate their jobs. I'm like, are they not working with data all day? Because it's the best, and but how do you know if it's like I should uproot my entire career? I mean, you were invested, like,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively, in an executive career. How did you say for sure, like, yeah, it's time, let's do this? Like, how do they know? How do you know that for sure? Or can you ever know it for sure?
Sure. So we like to break it down into 4 categories, right? Like, I'm not saying like this is like a 17 or 18-year-old, like, not that 17 or 18-year-olds can't like create booming businesses, right? I'm really talking about somebody that's gotten to a point in their career where they're seasoned, they have knowledge, they have an expertise, like they're becoming like that thought leader, but there is still something that's missing for them. And the way that we like to really identify that is, like, sometimes it starts like as a whisper, and it's like, it does start with I don't really want to go to work today. It might start as that little tiny voice in your head that's like, you know what, I really don't want to do this project. And then it starts to become louder, where maybe those louder roars is you're getting into fights with your partner. Like, maybe you're starting to get into squabbles with your coworkers. Maybe like you're just not delivering platinum work. There starts to be a crumble in the delivery of the work and the person that you're being for those people in your life. And it's usually because it's related to that symptom of it's like a symptom of like you not wanting to be at that job. But one of the biggest like things that we like to ask our clients is, if you did not have to go to work today, if you didn't have to worry about money, like if you didn't have to do that, like, what would you be doing? Like, if all that stuff was stripped away, like, and you didn't have to worry, what would you be doing? And typically that's where it's kind of like a starting point. That's where we really find people are in that like mastery level where they can actually take their like skills and expertise and their passion and turn that into a business. But if they're still kind of like that person that is still in those early stages of their career where they're still trying to figure out like what it is they're great at, like, that's kind of like, listen, you got to kind of get your feet a little bit more wet in the corporate world, or get some more knowledge and skill set before you can really like take what you know and turn it into a business.
Great advice. And I think about that a lot, like how I feel very fortunate that I found data leadership relatively early in my career, maybe a decade into my career, and have been building on that premise in some way or another ever since. And, and really I can trace back earlier, like I was always pulled towards this, right? And that I feel very, very fortunate about, because I also believe there's a lot of people out there who never find that at all. They work
Right.
their entire careers and never find that at all. So I think your point to that effect, like, if you have that thing, don't lose that. Like, if you're going to go, and if you didn't have to work for your job for money and all that, and you would go and do this anyway, consider yourself lucky that you even know what that is. And then maybe that is a good sign that you should be thinking about doing something bigger, because you have that good fortune of knowing, hey, this is what your life's work is about. I also think about, like, when I was in graduate school for my MBA, I took some entrepreneurial classes and what have you, and I talked to these people who didn't have that. They didn't have like, I'm a data leadership person and I do data leadership stuff. They had a need and a desire to be an entrepreneur, but they didn't care about so much what the function was. There was a story of a person who went and bought like a window manufacturing and installation company, and he wasn't a big window fan. Like, he wasn't like reading books about windows all the time, but he bought this business and turned it into something. But his passion was for owning a business. It didn't matter what the
Right.
business did so much as that he really loved that administration. Do you see that? And is that a good path usually to entrepreneurialism, or is that something different?
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything like flawed with that mindset, because at the end of the day, to me, it could also just sound like it could be that for that particular person, it's impact. Maybe they're just impacting those particular people in that business and they're growing it to a certain point and really impacting the lives that are for those particular people. Maybe they really like to take complicated problems where it's like a massive challenge and they're like, doesn't matter what business it is, they can like transition that and transform it into something bigger. So maybe that's kind of what their particular passion is. And it doesn't mean that they have to necessarily be passionate about the particular products per se, but maybe it's the impact and like where they get it from like A to like Z.
It's a good point. I think that somebody could have a passion literally for being an entrepreneur, for being the boss and trying to grow something. It doesn't matter as much what that is. And the opportunities could be in those areas that people aren't passionate about. Like I joke about like data leadership or whatever. I do that because I love it, not because it's a good business model. And yet, if you were passionate about being an entrepreneur and you found a good business model, that sounds like a really decent plan for an exit strategy from your current corporate gig.
Yeah, like it's interesting that you brought this up because I love TikTok, and there's this woman on TikTok who's really cool, and she talks about boring businesses, and she's like, listen, the businesses that I own aren't super sexy, but she just wants to be able to have like really successful businesses, and she doesn't mind that they're laundromats. She doesn't mind that they're ice makers. Like she doesn't mind that like she has a business where they like literally draw like crosswalk signs, She's like, no, it's just I really like to have like a really strong portfolio of businesses, and she has really strong leaders in those businesses that she mentors. So, I don't think it doesn't, and she's not, obviously no one's like saying, I'm so passionate about like laundromats. No, like no one's going to be passionate about that, but she's just passionate about being the entrepreneur and having like a really strong portfolio.
That's an interesting story. I also think like I could actually point in my own experience, like as a data leadership consultant, I'm there to help businesses in any industry do data leadership better, to build their systems better or what have you. And I mean, my current day job, I work in a place where I didn't have a whole lot of experience in the domain, but I have a lot of experience in the function. And so there can be that shift between domain and function and how it's positioned. And two, if you're going to go into a business that you don't love, and it happens to be a business that a lot of people do really love, then you're probably not going to be in the right business. And so I've like one that I recently stumbled into and just learning more about was like auto detailing. Like auto detailers are in every town. They're doing, car washes and in, detailing. It's a good thing to do in your car. I really should do that someday. But I learned about it. And what you find is this community of people who do this because they love it and then try to create a business around it because they love to do it. Data leadership consultants can be the same way. And so but then you have to compete with all of those people who truly love the thing. And if you are the equivalent of the person with the window installation company going into the world of detailers who love this function so much, you're going to be in a tough spot. But like to your point, laundromats, nobody's that deep into laundromats. Nobody's like, I cannot wait to watch those machines go. Like it's an interesting thought. I don't know that I've ever really thought about these in quite this context before. But getting back to like how you are engaging with folks and how your business helps people. And so obviously you're helping people manage that transition. Is your business set up as a consultancy? And you mentioned that you moved to the UK. Are you focusing your business there? Are you still in the US, or how do you manage that? Is it a global footprint, or how do you actually do the work as your own entrepreneur to help folks in their journeys to entrepreneurialism?
Yeah, when we were doing our market research, we were taking a look specifically in the e-learning industry. So what we technically do is part e-learning and coaching. And so when we were doing our market research, we realized that the e-learning industry is really booming in Asia. And then coming in net second is the United States. So most of our marketing and our business is geared towards the US, even though I'm based here in the United Kingdom, but our business is global. So anybody can really take part in our online programs as well as like coaching. And, so a lot of our marketing, like we don't target like the UK really at all. Love you guys, love the UK and all, but the US just has a stronger market for coaching and online learning services.
And are you engaging? I would imagine you're engaging with people on a one by one basis. This is probably more. I mean, it's you're working with people who are interested in making that transition versus businesses, or are you helping entrepreneurs get going, or is it more like professional coaching for the leadership? I don't know
Yeah,
if that was a
so
good question.
no, yeah, it's perfect. So we typically work with female executives. We love you men, but we just noticed that most of the people that are coming through our programs are women. And it's interesting because we didn't necessarily want it to be that way. But that's where we're at in our business. And we're realizing, oh, 99% of the people that are coming through our doors are women. Guess what? The people that wanted to leave their jobs and that own our company and running our company were women. And we were those women that were in their position all those years ago. So it makes kind of sense that we're kind of attracting people like us because we were those people. So it's typically going to be people that are in senior management. They are in executive levels as well, but we found that in our marketing messaging, when we were saying like we're looking for executive women, those women that were in senior management roles um, were actually still qualified to take their skills and expertise to turn it into a small business, and even like upper management, like they were almost ready as well. So we work for it with anything from like management, senior management, and executive level to turn to create a business.
As you work with senior executives or executives, senior management, folks that have that thought leadership ability or seniority and expertise to be able to go out, like parlay that into a entrepreneurial endeavor, oftentimes a content creation strategy becomes part of that journey. And so they may be doing that even prior to making that kind of entrepreneurial leap. What kind of advice do you have for people who are trying to open that door or do some sort of easier transition to that entrepreneurial journey? Maybe by doing more thought leadership. I mean, podcasts, I know everybody seems to have one, but there's a million different reasons why you might want to have a podcast. What's your advice for folks that are thinking about, like, how do I start to test the waters of whether or not my ideas here are any good and maybe worth quitting the cushy executive job for, before they take that leap entirely?
Sure. So I think on the content creation side, we always suggest that a small business owner has one piece of long form content, and long form content is either a blog, a vlog, or a podcast. And and then when we're thinking about like whether somebody can test like what they're great at before they kind of turn that into a business, we like to suggest like like some people think like you have to quit your job right away and like go cold turkey to like start your own thing, but it can be like a gradual process. And I think that's where people kind of get tripped up on like, well, how exactly am I going to actually create my own business? I can't leave my job. I need health insurance. I need all these things. It's like, hold on, relax. We can pick an end date when you want to get out of that job and create like all the steps in between that need to happen. And so we can that's kind of like your testing phase where you can test the different types of skill sets that you have and start doing like freelancing, consulting. Pick up some small like jobs that you can do on the side for maybe past clients, maybe some new clients that you can get referred to test maybe some of that expertise that you've picked up along your way. And then you can like start creating your like long form content and put out into the world. Hopefully I answered that correctly.
Completely. And I think it's worth reminding folks, like, you don't have to have decided you're going to quit your day job to go be an entrepreneur. Like, it sounds like that advice plays if you're just exploring and you're just trying to understand, why am I feeling unfulfilled in my life and what I'm doing. There's ways that you might be able to solve for that without being a binary decision of, oh, I've got to quit what I do and have done for my entire career to go do something else. It may be more subtle than that, and you may be able to fill that in. And so I think that's a good place to start, is that if you explore it and keep learning and keep doing things because you're called to do them, good things happen from that. You learn about yourself, you learn about your career journey, and it's, life's too short to not explore that stuff and to understand as best you can what makes you happy in the end. I think that's the whole point, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
absolutely.
So how do you manage to juggle all of this, with, because you're in the UK, you've got the two businesses with the podcast as well as Cutclass. You've got a family, you've got all these different things. As an advice to people that are going from what is a pretty regimented, because that's the downside of flexibility, right? Some of the structure disappears with that as well. So you have to have more discipline, more structure, self-imposed versus externally imposed. How do you manage all of that and help others through that at the same time? It must be even more pressure than just trying to get it right for yourself. You're also trying to get it right for yourself as an example for all these people you're trying to help in your day job.
Yeah, so I just, I'm almost done with this book called The Big Leap. I don't know if you've read it before, but it's by Gay Hendricks. And and in the book, like he talks about how we operate in like four quadrants in our lives. And the first quadrant is the zone of incompetence. So this is a zone where people operate where they don't really know anything about. So let's take, for example, there's a lawyer that gets paid like $1,000 an hour, but he has like a leaky faucet at home. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to fix the leaky faucet. And then on a Saturday, he spends like 5 hours trying to fix this leaky faucet. And he's like, crap, I need to call a plumber anyways to fix this. Well, he's just wasted $5,000 of his time trying to fix something that he knows nothing about. So that's like your zone of incompetence. The next one is your zone of competence, and it's stuff you're good at, but there probably would be somebody that could cope a little bit better with that type of task or job, right? And then you have your zone of excellence, and these are the things where you're gelling, like you're really good at it, you're super awesome at it. But then you have your zone of genius. And so when everybody should like have a goal to get into that zone of genius, but for some reason there's like these upper limit things that are preventing us from getting into that zone of genius. And it could be things like complaining about like needing to do emails today, complaining that you have to do X, Y, and Z admin task, whatever it is that's really preventing you from getting into that zone of genius. You have to identify what really are those upper limits that are preventing you from operating at like that genius level. So what we've gotten really good at Cutclass is identifying like hiring help that can really take on those tasks that maybe we are competent in, maybe we're excellent in, but how can we get somebody that can do those tasks where it is their genius zone? So when we're talking about like managing it all, I don't manage it all, and I choose not to manage it all for the things that I know that I'm like not great at or I don't want to like manage. Like I have a personal assistant for our family, and I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to worry about like our laundry being picked up or being folded and put away, because I need to like use my mind to like think about my zone of genius and also be present for my partner and our son. So you can like take those upper limits as like far as you'd want to really make sure you're always staying in like that zone of genius. And I think it's just identifying like what your genius zone is first, and then figuring out what are all those upper limits that are preventing me from always operating there.
It's great advice. I was just thinking of so many examples of where I've done things where I'm like, why did I just spend an hour trying to save $3 on something versus, yeah. It's really good advice that I think can resonate with everybody in the audience, because I think that's a human nature thing, is that you're like, oh, it's not going to be any big deal. And I mean, how many home plumbing projects went as well as you thought they were going to go, right? It never does. It never does. Just call an expert beforehand and recognize, the opportunity that you have to learn from them and the work that they do for you too, is recognize, hey, I'm in the presence of a person who's really an expert at something I don't know anything about, and I irritate everyone who comes to my house to do work that I can't do myself, and I will stand there and ask them questions and derail them. I'm kind of like a podcast host in doing that, and it just goes really bad. They're like, Anthony, stop talking, let me get this done. I'll answer any questions to you later. But
It's the same for me.
Yeah.
No, it's the same for me. Like, I recently started really getting heavily into like SEO because I want our content to perform. And so I started taking like a free SEO like course on HubSpot, and I started digging into different like SEO tools and all sorts, right? And I go, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like I can learn it. Like I probably can learn it because I'm not like, I'm not like a silly person. Like I can learn it, but like, do I really need to be learning it so much in depth, or do I need to know just enough so that when I do hire a third party, that I can at least be on a somewhat of a knowledge level with them to kind of understand what they're doing, but I don't need to know like the deep technical stuff about it. So when I like read the big leap, I'm like, okay, I'm going to need to hire somebody that knows exactly what they're doing so that I can stay in my zone of genius. So I think everybody falls into that trap.
Yeah, and as I bring it back to like a data leadership topic, I think about, and this is relevant for everybody, and as you move through your career, things that you used to do, you can't do anymore. As you're higher up in management, as you're into more leadership positions, like I grew up in technology. I was programming stuff and doing data stuff, and I've managed to do it most of my career. And for the last couple of years, just nothing. Like I want to do more of it, and it's just, it can never be a high enough priority compared to my other priorities, and the opportunity cost of being technical hands on is just too high at this point. And so you got to let that go. Sometimes I think about the last baseball game I played in high school. I was a big baseball player growing up, and in high school we had our final game. And like nobody on my team was going to like college to play baseball or anything like that. Like our last day of varsity baseball in high school, we game was over. We walked out to the left field for some reason. I don't even know why they had us walk down to like left field, and we all took a knee. And the coach was like, "Nope, you're done. You're done playing baseball. It's time to move on and focus on your life." And I think back to that. I don't even remember what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but I think back to that. It's like at certain milestones, you just have to let go. And I look back on that time, but there's always going to be that last game. There's always going to be that last time you did something on your own that you just can't afford to do anymore. And the way you put it with that zone of genius, where you can focus on those things that you uniquely do well and add so much more value by doing that. That's what data leadership is all about. I mean, that's really what it's all about, is how do I take all of these inputs and then drive some sort of action, some sort of activity or decision to optimize the business results in the end. You're talking about data leadership as you explain this. It's exactly the same thing.
Yay.
But it's it's different lenses to the same fundamental human equation. And I think that, if people out there are thinking about making change or going into different careers, going into an entrepreneurial endeavor, it's, first about understanding where you are and what you do well and what you want to spend that third of your life doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we only have another minute or so left. So have we missed anything? I feel like we've talked a lot about things that people could be thinking about. But do you have any like parting thoughts, any advice that you'd like to give folks that they're probably swimming with ideas right now after listening to us for the last 40 minutes or so?
Yeah, I would say on a personal note, I would say as a fellow podcaster, support Anthony. Being a podcaster isn't easy. Bringing on, he brings on specific guests for a reason, and he's really giving you like the best content to really drive your data leadership forward. So go out and support everything that he's doing, because it is phenomenal. And I love it. So make sure you're supporting, because a lot of work does go into it. And then secondly, we work 1/3 of our entire lives. And so make sure you're spending that time doing something that you really love and has an impact on the people around you. If you have like that voice inside of you that's like telling you that maybe you're unhappy or there's more for you, there probably is. So just listen to it, because at some point that little whisper is going to become a roar, and it will kick you into action. If it's not now, it definitely will in the future.
It's great parting wisdom. Before we go, what's the best way for folks to find you?
You can hit me up on TikTok at ItsRoGroh, or you can say hello to me on LinkedIn at Rochelle Groh, and our website, Let's Cutclass.
Outstanding. Rochelle, thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Anthony. I had a blast.
And thank you all for joining us today. As always, you'll find more information and links in the show notes. Go to dataleadershiplessons.com to subscribe and check out past episodes and accelerate your journey with training at dataleadershiptraining.com. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.